The following podcast is a presentation of This Is Infamous. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to a brand new episode of The Lifted Embargo. I'm your host, as always, Bully Donnelly, who you can find at thisisinfamous.com. And this is the movie review podcast where, we review movies, mostly the newest releases hitting neighborhood, local theaters this coming weekend. This week, we have one film on the docket we're going to talk about. And as I do every single episode, I like to try and bring in another critic to wax poetic with me and bring a fresh perspective and different opinion to the discussion as well. And this week, considering everyone seems to be north of the border this week for the Toronto International Film Festival, I had to really look far and wide to find a colleague who was not in Canada. And as a result, it brought on one of my old favorites. You can find his work at USA Today and follow him on Twitter as well at Brian Truitt. So the namesake himself, Brian Truitt, joins me once again. Brian, thank you very much, man, for coming through in the clutch.
Of course, I'm wearing a T-shirt right now that says, "I'd rather be in Toronto."
Well, I would not, even though it's I love film festivals. I love watching sort of wall-to-wall motion pictures. But with that said, being under the weather this week, probably not good for me to be around all those people and make it worse.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto was my first time I ever been to a film festival last year. And it would be cool if I just went there as a critic. But, like, I had to watch all the movies, and I had to do a bunch of interviews, too. And sleep had to get in there, like, a few hours, like, over the course of, like, 7 days. So it was crazy.
Yeah, I'm always in favor of all the work and then getting drunk at the end. So I can't – look, I wish well to everybody who is up in Toronto. They're going to see a bunch of incredible films. Keep your eyes peeled for all the coverage coming out, as I'm sure you'll hear about a bunch of things that you'll want to see in the future. But in the meantime, screw all those people who are there, and I'm not. In the meantime, look, we have one film that we're going to discuss on the docket this week, and that is the film Sully. This is Clint Eastwood's real-life biopic of sorts of the pilot Chesley Sully Sullenberger, who is famous for having landed U.S. Airways Flight 1549 on the Hudson River with all passengers walking away, surviving in a pretty incredible tale of heroism that took place not too long ago. Film stars Tom Hanks as the namesake, the title character, Sully, as well as Aaron Eckhart, Laura Linney, and a gun, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, if you are familiar with what happened with this flight from LaGuardia that basically was taken down by a bird strike, a flock of birds incapacitating engines of the flight and forcing it down, then you sort of are aware of the events of the film and what it portrays. So with that said, with that laid out as far as what Sully's tale is all about, Brian, what did you think of Sully?
I liked it. I didn't love it. I thought Tom Hanks is really, really, really good. Aaron Eckhart is great. He's one of the more underrated actors, I feel, in Hollywood, and he's really good, especially them together. The movie as a whole, though, it never kind of quite caught me. Kind of the thing about, I mean, like you mentioned, kind of, it was such a great story because, and it happened really quick. I mean, they were only in the air for 200 seconds, and he had to do a forced water landing on the Hudson. And then the rescue operation was really ridiculously efficient because they got everybody out of the plane and out of the water in like 24 minutes. So you could almost do that in real time for a 96-minute movie. It's just, kind of, it's everything else about this movie that kind of seems padded. But Eastwood does with the sequence where they have to land and everything. It's really tense. You kind of know what's going to happen, but it's still, he ratchets up a lot of tension with it. And, it's a really kind of cool sequence. And there are parts where afterward, Sully and Jeff Skiles, who was played by Aaron Eckhart, his first officer, they're getting hauled in by the National Transportation Board because the board feels like, well, you should have tried to save the plane because this engine might not have been as bad off as you said it was, and you could have made it to one of these other two airports, and you shouldn't have downed the plane. It was kind of it almost felt like an insurance thing. It's like, why'd you just kill our plane, kind of thing. But they're the antagonist. I mean, the biggest antagonists in this movie are the National Transportation Board. So there's a certain lack of drama here, even though it's like there's this big rescue portion of it that's filled with drama. It almost like it has to be padded. The rest of the 96 minutes have to be padded with like just other random drama.
Yeah, for me, this is a film that sort of proves that you don't have to make a movie about everything.
True. Exactly.
And on paper, you would look at this and say, man, this was an incredibly heroic moment of humanity. This incredible thing happened with a plane crash and everybody walked away. And you think about sort of the cinematic value of showing, the forced water landing and sort of the aftermath. The problem is that beyond that, there's nothing to this movie. And you see it sort of in the way that Eastwood lays out the film, in that the only way he could even get to a tight 96-minute running time is to repetitively show the landing on multiple occasions.
Like the full landing.
Yes.
Not just like parts of it. The full thing.
Yes. I mean, it is done to death. Not only showing sort of the landing itself, which I think is done about 3 times. Then you see simulation landings that are done about 4 times. Then there's also the nightmare landing that never was, that's done about 3 more times. So really all you're doing is taking 208 seconds and stacking them on top of each other to try and fill this thing out. So, usually you hear the idea of like, it's 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. This is the reverse. This is 5 pounds of shit in a 10-pound bag. They can't even fill the whole bag with everything they want to try and get into this film without it feeling so thin. Now, I think the thing that works for this film is the casting. Tom Hanks as Sully works because everybody likes Tom Hanks. And the second Tom Hanks shows up as sort of this likable, by the book, good guy, veteran of the sky, you immediately like this character, and you want only good things to happen to him. It's the same thing that we saw in sort of Castaway, same thing we saw with Captain Phillips. It's a very similar character. Tom Hanks is just a likable guy, and he brings this likableness to characters that he plays. We don't see Tom Hanks ever really play a villain. Tom Hanks is always a guy that you're like, it's a pretty nice guy. I'll hang out with this guy for a little while. And I think that's what works here for Sully, is that you don't necessarily mind it so much because you're spending time with Tom Hanks. So hanging out with Tom Hanks for 90 minutes, not a bad proposition. Okay, I could do that. And it's relatively easy. It's breezy. There's no problem hanging out with Tom Hanks. It's when you look at the rest of the film that there's nothing there. And I sat here sort of watching this film, waiting for the other shoe to drop, like waiting for, all right, well, when is this film going to be about something? Because really it's just sort of a reenactment of this crash. And, you bring up the antagonist of the NTSB and whatnot, and that's really all that they want to do. And, there's a couple of things in here that I think when you look at sort of Clint Eastwood and sort of who Clint Eastwood has become now, start to really peel away the surface, I think, of some of the film. So maybe you have like the NTSB is like the bad guys of the film. So you're like, okay, well, we sort of know where Clint Eastwood is politically a little bit right now. So now he's like sort of picking at the bureaucracy of government, as a way to give this film something else to do other than the crash. I also found some of the nightmare sequences a little bit heavy-handed. They're very, very strong 9/11 undertones sort of in those moments, as far as saying like, hey, look, we had a good guy in the cockpit to save everybody. What would have happened if things would have gone wrong? It would have been disastrous and whatnot. And you made me feel a little bit uncomfortable in those moments as well, because they are really heavy-handed in what would happen if he tried to take this plane sort of back to LaGuardia where it took off from, and sort of the catastrophe that would have resulted. So in watching this film, I kept waiting for it to do something more than just reenact the water landing, and it never does. And as a result, I sort of just was left with 90 minutes of emptiness.
Well, and I actually disagree a little bit, because I kind of the nightmare sequences kind of work for me a little bit, because they gave an insight into what was internally bothering Sully. Kind of, he was having these nightmares about what would have happened if he had done something differently. He was kind of as the NTSB was kind of second guessing him. He was second guessing himself too. And there's that one little piece of like Katie Couric is like a nightmare villain, where she like chastises him for like landing the plane on the water. And I think that was kind of an interesting little touch. So there's a lot of things, but there's little pieces like that kind of give an inside information about kind of what he was thinking, what kind of man he is. But it almost feels like there's parts of it, he wanted to do a biopic about Sully, but like halfway through he's like, well, he's not very interesting for a biopic, so we should just get rid of that. Because there's like one sequence where like a backstory where he was young.
Where he's like
out of nowhere. It's just like it seems weird, because it's like it's one little sequence in the movie. It's not like it's a flashback, but it's not like there's like 5 or 6 flashbacks. There's like one flashback. And so I feel like,
well, there's two. There's two flashbacks actually. There's the one where he's a kid and he's first learning to fly, and then there's the second one where he's in the military. So there's two that go back to like, how what kind of responsible pilot he learned to be along the way. And there are these little sort of inserts that don't really amount to much, other than just like, well, let's just throw something else in to show that he's been this sort of responsible pilot all his life.
Yeah, and I feel like if you're gonna do that movie, then do that movie. But this seems just like, okay, well, let's show this awesome thing that happened like 3 times, and then let's have a bar scene, let's have a bunch of hotel scenes, let's have like a whole legal thriller kind of thing at the end, So I feel like it's like a Frankensteining of different movies.
Yeah, see, the only thing, I'm not a fan of sort of dipping into like that component of his mentality, because, like he says, because it's so quick, because it all happens so quick, you never really get a sense that much of that is considered. As he kind of testifies when he's being questioned and in front of the NTSB, he says it was kind of a gut. Like, this is my experience. I kind of reacted the way I should have. Aaron Eckhart as his co-pilot, his first mate, basically confirms, like, he basically shrugged off all protocol in order to do what he thought was right, and as a result, this is how we wound up where we wound up, and with everybody being saved. The thing that I dug sort of, and I found to be an interesting aspect of the film, and I wish it would have maybe done a little bit more with it than just on the surface level, is sort of the overwhelming experience of being a hero, sort of the cult of celebrity that now comes with this guy just doing the right thing, saving everybody, and now sort of being hounded, bombarded, his families, all the things that come with that. This very sort of uncomfortable life now he has to lead for a few moments until sort of the next thing comes up to push him from the news cycle, which sort of evoked sort of memories of the film Hero, Stephen Frears' 1992 film with Dustin Hoffman and Andy Garcia about. I mean, that film goes in a much different direction, but once again, sort of trumping up, how we worship people who do the right thing, and how in doing so we create a very uncomfortable situation for them being in the spotlight, something they never asked to do by just doing the right thing. So I think Sully does some interesting things with that because you do see him like he's going on Letterman. They're doing talk show circuits. People are coming up and hugging him on the street for what he did. And yes, while his actions are commendable, it's something that he never really he just was somebody in that moment. He happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, but did the right thing. And he's not asking for these sort of accolades and all this adoration. He just wants to be left alone to sort of deal with like the trauma of what he experienced. So I think in that respect, there's something interesting there to Sully. And I think because it's Hanks, once again, he manages to inject some humanity into that character and create that sort of layer of this guy who just wants to go back to his life. All he wants to do is go back to flying. Like that's all he talks about. It's like I just like to go back in the air again and start piloting flights again. So I like that aspect of the film, but yeah, the rest of it, there's just not enough here. I mean, there is nothing here. There's nothing even here with his family. Like his family he has these cold interactions with his wife on the phone.
And just on the phone. That's all we see her is on the phone.
And his wife is played by Laura Linney, who's like an MVP all the time. Like you put Laura Linney in your film and you're like, all right, we're going to get something cool out of this. But she doesn't do anything here. They're just on the phone. He like doesn't want them to come out to where he is. He's got daughters who are basically, I think all we ever see of the daughters is like the back of their heads watching TV. Yeah. So it's this really strange atmosphere that's created too, where you would think that this would be sort of this moment where maybe you bring together a family and show sort of the effect of it on all of them. And he remains so isolated and distant from anybody that's close to him that it's a head scratcher as far as the film's concerned.
Well, yeah, the only thing that really saves it is Tom Hanks, but it's because no one else could play this character other than him. I mean, no one else. You just I mean, he didn't even have to act. He could just stand there and sit there, and you're like, okay, I buy this because it's Tom Hanks. So, and he has that kind of gentleness and gravitas, inherent gentleness and gravitas to him. And then he never phones anything in. I mean, he does a great job as his character. And like I said, kind of him and Aaron Eckhart together, I like this movie because of them. And when we get to the end where, kind of they have to like prove themselves in front of like a public hearing, that's some of my favorite stuff just because it's two guys just trying like against the world almost. So I dig that. But again, the rest of the movie, if they weren't in it, this thing would be unwatchable.
Yeah, I mean, you have sort of like Michael Malley is like the head of like, the NTSB, like questioning them, and they make him out to be like this real dick. Who's just like
Anna Gunn too? Anna Gunn is like the unnamed person, like board member to his right.
Yeah,
like, but it's just but they're totally like antagonistic against Sully for most of the movie, and then all of a sudden they have this like Capra-esque. Oh, he's cool. He's our hero. At the end, it's just like it's like Whiplash.
Yeah, it's this very odd like skepticism of how they could have done things differently. And yeah, like basically what it amounts to is, well, how could the plane have been saved? Because one of the things, and as they once again try to show Sully as being this great guy, even after he lands the plane and, he's one who's taking the lead, very calm, very cool, very collected, and making sure everybody gets off the plane. His first concern when they get onto shore is making sure he has the survivor count, of knowing how many people he did manage to save, if there were any life losses on the flight. And you have these sort of two board members who are just sort of always looking at what he's saying with a side eye as if the lives didn't matter and the plane was the only thing that mattered. Like, oh, well, if the plane would have been saved, but 4 people would have died, well, I guess I guess we'll just call it a wash. And so yeah, you have once again this film that never had to be a film. It's 208 seconds of amazingness that happened in real life, but you can't make a film based off of 208 seconds. There has to be more. I mean, you can make a short. You can make a short on 208 seconds, but you can't make a feature length film on those 208 seconds where you have nothing to go around the flight.
Well, and that's kind of it's almost the fact of it was such a miracle event, almost kills its cinematic qualities because nobody got injured. I mean, the worst thing that happened to someone was like a deep laceration into a stewardess's leg. Everything
a family got
out
separated.
fine.
Like that was it. One guy wound up in Jersey, and the rest of his family wound up in New York, and that was it.
And so it's all that it's just like all this. It was like the greatest thing that ever happened. So there's no inherent drama.
No.
To it. And then so we have to spend probably 20 or 30 minutes meeting. I don't think we even get names of half these people, these passengers, but they spend way too much time like introducing us to these passengers, the mom with the kid, the three family dudes, just random people who, they are there merely to like have you kind of care about the fact that Sully has to save them. That is it. They don't have character. I don't think they have even character names. They're just there to be saved.
See, I think that's one of those things where the nightmare sequences, I think in that case, work against that moment because the film the film opens with the nightmare. So when you and I will give it credit. The sound design on the film is pretty solid. And sort of getting all of the sounds of like what the plane sounds like taking off, the runway, the in the air, the bird strike with the engine, like all of that is really solid. And the film opens with the nightmare sequence. So I think maybe if you opened actually with the landing and then you went from there into the post, sort of the aftermath and the investigation, then it might make some sense. But you start off sort of with the nightmares, and then you sort of work your way backwards to the landing. So now by the time you get to the landing, you already know that everybody's going to be okay. You already know that he's gonna take this plane and put it in the water. So there, even as he's trying to contemplate what to do, you have already sort of gone down the path of the worst possible scenario he could have went with. And so now, like, what options do you have other than his heroic save the day moment? So yeah, it does take any sort of drama out of that. I think it eliminates most of the tension of the film because we already know sort of what the real life scenario is. And look, there are ways where you can take those things, even knowing the outcome, and still make it very white knuckle dramatic and tense. But Eastwood doesn't do that here. Instead, he just sort of does it, and it feels so matter of fact. Like the fact that they land in the Hudson feels so whatever when it happens, that it's not one of those like rousing, like crowd pleasing, everybody out of their everybody on their feet moments. It's just sort of like, oh yeah, I saw that coming. Cool visually, but dramatically did nothing for me. And I think that's one of the real drawbacks of the film, is that it just the things that would make that moment cool cinematically are removed from it. And as a result, you're just there with sort of this hollow reenactment.
Well, I think they made a filmmaking decision, kind of if they had started with the landing, it wouldn't have felt like a movie about Sully. It would have been a movie about this plane landing and everybody on it. It probably would have taken Sully a little bit out of it. I mean, he still would have been a main character, but it would have been about the whole landing itself. It would have been about everybody on board. But by putting it in his mind with the nightmare sequence at first, he makes it clear that, okay, Eastwood makes it clear, okay, this is about Sully. This is about his internal struggle. This is about his character. He is the guy we're on this journey with. But then, like you said, I mean, kind of, you then take out some of the drama you could actually have play with in there by making that decision. So that's kind of it's. So I see what he's doing, but it just didn't quite work.
I mean, if you put the nightmares afterwards, I think it works better because now. I mean, look, if you open with the actual landing and then you move into sort of the investigation, where now you could say, like, well, why are people harping on this guy who did this amazing thing? And then you sort of bring in the culture of celebrity to it, and that sort of also, brings into, what he's dealing with on top of that. Then you also maybe bring in the nightmares, too, of, like, what if I did this wrong? Like, how would this have... Like sort of the PTSD, like post-traumatic stress, bringing that sort of aspect into it of, hey, this could have gone really wrong. Like, and once again, doubting himself, but then or also reaffirming that he did the right thing. So, there's no real ever question of does he doubt what he did? And they try to sort of bring that into sort of Hank's portrayal of, like, should he be doubting what he did? Did he do the wrong thing? But by knowing that everybody lived and that the plane landed, you sort of, it's sort of that self-doubt rings hollow, because what was the alternative? The other alternative was that just the plane made it. So, the end result in the zero-sum game is basically, did people live? The crew lived, the passengers lived, everybody should walk away from it and then look and say, well, what happened with the plane? Like, that should really be the main focus, is what happened with the plane. And I think that's also part of the problem with the investigation, is that because there was no loss of life, it's just property damage. The investigation feels sort of trumped up and bureaucratic, because everything in the end, everything worked out okay, except for the plane. So yeah, I just felt like narratively, there wasn't a lot of places for this film to go. There are some interesting wrinkles that I think it brings to the table, but it doesn't quite know what to do with them. And as a result, yeah, you just have this film that sort of throws a bunch of stuff in there just to get to 96 minutes. When really this film was like 35 minutes, like a tight 35 minutes, might have been a lot better. But at 96 minutes, not a fan.
Yeah. Tom Hanks nerds will want to see it, I think, because again, he does a good job like he does normally. But yeah, it's on the whole, it's just like.
All right, so I think we could both reach a consensus on Sully. It's all right. It's nothing special. It's Tom Hanks doing his Tom Hanksiest, and that is sort of the highlight of the film. But the rest of it, the plane landing is fine. It's cool to see. But there's just no there with Sully. So, even at 96 minutes, it's a real stretch to get to that point. So with that said, Brian, before I let you go, man, thank you once again for not going to Toronto in order to be able to talk about this film with me. Before I let you go, let everybody know where it is they can find you out there on the interwebs.
Sure. I'm at Twitter at Brian Truitt. You can find my stuff at life.usatoday.com. And I'm also co-host on the Mothership Geek Culture podcast. So you can find that on iTunes and Stitcher and SoundCloud and all that kind of stuff.
See, so there you go. Make sure you find all of Brian Truitt's work. Always good stuff. And always a pleasure to have you on the show, man. You're like, by the end of this thing, you're going to probably be our most guested guest.
I'm like the Charles Nelson Riley of your podcast.
First of all, I would love to have a Charles Nelson Riley on this podcast. And if only I could also get a Brett Summers, this would be... I'll be Gene Rayburn. What the hell? Give me one of those awesome long-sticked mics. We'll bring back the match game the right way. not with Alec Baldwin. Look, make sure you follow all our social media accounts as well at Tis Infamous. That's for the mothership of This Is Infamous, not the Mothership podcast, but the mothership of our whole website. This Is Infamous, the home of the Lifted Embargo. So at Tis Infamous for all our content going up there. And for me, at Infamous Kid, KIDD, for all my random ramblings and musings, my stream of consciousness put into the written word in 140 characters or less. So that's at Infamous Kid. Facebook, 2 pages to like, facebook.com/tisinfamous, facebook.com/Billy the Kid. For all our awesome and interesting discussion threads, be sure to participate and get involved on those 2 pages. So like them and do your part to be part of the discussion on Facebook. Podcasts can be found wherever podcasts can be found. So whatever your preferred distribution podcast model is, you can find us there. You found us here once already, but if you got one that you like better, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, SoundCloud, Blueberry, you go ahead and find us. We just ask that you subscribe so that you never miss an episode. They're brought directly to you every single week. And also that you rate and you comment. So let us know what a good job we're doing. If we're not doing a good job, just keep your mouth shut. But if we're doing a great job, 5 stars, leave some comments. That helps for our placement on those different places. So every little bit helps, and I'll be greatly appreciated for that. You can find my work at a regular basis. thisisinfamous.com. Whether it's video, audio, or a review, you can find it there. Or written, yeah. So you can find it there at thisisinfamous.com. So I want to thank my guest, Brian Truitt. I've been your host, Billy Donnelly. This has been The Lifted Embargo, not from Toronto. And I'll be back next week talking more movies with somebody else or maybe Charles Nelson Riley. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work out. But in the meantime, you have yourself a pleasant, immediate future. We're out for now. Peace. The Lifted Embargo is a podcast presentation of This Is Infamous.